Okay, let's start first of all about this week's Torah portion. Anybody know what it is? No, nobody looks in advance. I tell you. What? When was Beshalach? That was last week. Yitro, very good. All right. Took him a minute, but he got it. All right. Parshat Yitro. It's funny. All of the, like I mentioned before, the books of the Bible in Jewish tradition are usually named by one of the early words in the portion, usually in the first sentence. And so it mentions Yitro, who is Moshe's father-in-law, because he heard about what happened and he's bringing his wife and sons with him to Moshe. But the most important element of this week's Torah portion is the Aseret HaDibrot, the Ten Commandments. Right? We have the whole situation in which it describes how they're supposed to prepare for 3 days. Why 3 days? It says 3 days, don't come near a woman or don't come near your wife. The Bible sees any kind of fluids that come out of a person can be considered ritually impure or causing ritual impurity. So a seminal discharge creates a state of ritual impurity for either man or woman. The man, obviously, because he does it, and if the woman has sexual relations. So they were not supposed to come in contact with the holy. And they understood 3 days, that's all over and done with. So you go to the mikveh, you're all purified. So they have to be purified for the Mamad Har Sinai, from the time of giving the Torah at Sinai. But also there's this element that is seen there, that everybody goes to the mikveh. All right? When is a time that everyone goes to the mikveh? If they're converting to Judaism, everyone goes to the mikveh. What else is involved with conversion? Males have to be circumcised. Mm-hmm. So we're told before the first Passover, they had to be circumcised. And the last thing in the act of conversion is to accept upon yourself Ol Malchut Shemaim, the yoke of heaven, the mitzvot. So in a sense, at least metaphorically, all of Israel is going through what we could consider a conversion process at Sinai. Okay? So there, at Sinai, everyone goes to the mikveh, everyone accepts the yoke of the commandments, thus accepting upon themselves to live in accordance with Jewish law and tradition. Let me just get the last these in. Right, Edith, just a second. Okay. So that's, and then of course we have the moment when Moshe goes up on Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, and we have the giving of the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Commandments. Remember, in Hebrew, it's not called the 10 Commandments. It's Aseret HaDibrot, 10 statements is actually the language that is used. 10 Commandments is not the language that is used in the Torah to describe what was received there. That can help because there's some discussion, what is the nature of the first commandment? I'm the Lord God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. What kind of a commandment is that? Okay. So, but as a statement or as a general statement introducing everything else that follows, it makes sense. And the rest are mostly are clearly do's or do nots commandments. So that, of course, serves as the central core, the most important element of this week's Torah portion. In traditional synagogues, many synagogues, the honor of the reading of the Aseret HaDibrot is given to the rabbi of the congregation, because that's a very special honor to be able to be the one who has that aliyah. And also, at least I'm not sure about Sephardic tradition. I don't recall, but in Ashkenazic tradition, if you're not already standing up for the Torah reading, you stand up when we read the Ten Commandments, the Aseret HaDibrot, as a special honor. On the other hand, there's some rabbis who say, "What are you doing? The whole Torah is important. It's not just these 10 commandments, these Aseret HaDibrot. Why should you stand only for those?" So either you stand for all the Torah reading or you don't stand for Aseret HaDibrot. But the major custom is to stand for the Aseret HaDibrot when they're read in the synagogue. Okay, last week when we were going over the ending the Hebrew, I said we're going to look at those blessings that come at the end. Anybody need that doesn't have? A couple. All right. You forgot yours. All right, I got one more that's in good condition. I'll take the lousy one. So we were going through some of the brachot, the additional blessings. And it's significant that recitation of a bracha, of a blessing, recognizes that it's something special. We're continuing on page 51. I think I spoke about the word bracha is a very difficult word to translate. Normally, most of the time you'll see it is translated as blessed. Baruch atah Hashem. Blessed are you, Lord our God. Some prefer praise, because how can we bless God? You know, what can I say to God? I'm blessing you. What does that mean? I'm blessing God. Praising God, okay. But blessing God, that doesn't make much sense. And then another understanding of it is you're not praising God, you're not blessing God, but you're recognizing God as the source of blessing. Baruch Pa'ul is a kind of a passive form. God is the blessing. He is the source of blessing. And if you think of it in those terms, then when we hear what we find on this page, these blessings upon natural wonders or other wonders in the world, we're recognizing God as the creator of all these things, the source of all these things, the source of the wonders and blessings that are in the world. Right? If you want to be poetic, and I use that one in some translations, source or wellspring of blessing are you, Lord our God. That's a lot of words to say in there, so it's not going to catch on too much. But I think it's a significant way of understanding. Okay, so when we experience different things besides when we're going to eat or perform a mitzvah, the rabbis prescribed different blessings which enhance our experience of them, make us more conscious of them. So on seeing lightning, or other natural phenomena. All right, well, that's the first bracha. Let's read that together. We say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oseh ma'aseh v'reishit. So actually, the translation, the literal translation, who makes the acts of creation, or the wonders, the brings about the acts of creation. Okay, hearing thunder. Okay, so if we hear the thunder, what do we say? Let's read that one. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekocho ugvurato male olam. And it's a nice translation, whose power and might pervades the world or fills the world. The sound of thunder. Now we know the relationship between thunder and lightning. I don't know how much the ancients understood that relationship, but in one of the Psalms, 29, I think it is, we talked about the voice of God. I mentioned it the other day when I was talking about Psalms and how one of the Psalms may have originated as a pagan hymn of Baal, the god of the sky and the heavens and everything like that. Thunder, lightning is always the identified with storm gods in many pagan traditions. So it's the strength of God, or the mighty Thor in those who are into the comic books and that sort of thing. Although there was a god Thor in Norse mythology. Okay. On seeing the ocean. This presumably is not the Mediterranean, although some say it's the Mediterranean, others say it's the Atlantic or Pacific. One recites the blessing, number 3, the third one. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa et hayam hagadol. Okay, made the great sea. Right? And if you're interviewed at a demonstration dealing with the Palestinian Gaza issue from the river to the sea, what is the river?
Jordan.
The Jordan. What is the sea?
The Mediterranean.
Mediterranean. If you want to have fun, look at these interviews with people who are demonstrating and saying, from river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. Ask them what river and what sea it is. 90% of the time, they have no idea what they're talking about. It's just which says something to protests. You catch a slogan and you say it. And what does that mean? If Palestine shall be freed, does that mean there's no more Israel and no more Jews? That's why a lot of see it as a very anti-Semitic concept. Okay. Seeing other beauties of nature. You see a very handsome man or a beautiful woman. Okay. That's the next bracha. We say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekacha lo be'olamo. Such things exist in his world. And number 17 is foreseeing the rainbow. So let's say that. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zocher haberit v'ne'eman bivrito v'kayam b'ma'amaro. That's a mouthful there, his statement. We praise God who is true, is faithful with us, is true to his word, and remembers his covenant with creation. What is this a reference to?
The flood.
The flood. And what did we have after the flood of Noah? The rainbow. Does it mean rainbows didn't exist before then? No, probably not. But it does mean that you see the rainbow and you're reminded of God's covenant not to destroy the world with a flood again. All right, the next page on seeing trees and blossom, the first blossoms of the year for a tree. All right, let's read that. We say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shelo nisar be'olamo davar uvara vo briot tovot v'ilanot tovim lehanot mahem b'nei adam. That's a long bracha. I guarantee you, I don't remember. I tell you, I don't remember this one offhand either. There.
Yeah, I don't have the.
You don't have page 52?
No.
58 we didn't get.
Yeah.
Oh, 52, 58 you didn't get. All right, I'll have to send those out to you. 52 to 58. Maybe I thought we wouldn't be doing them. All right. Okay, because I want to go over these other blessings are good ones for us to practice. Okay. Bli neder, as they say, without taking an oath. All right. Why do we say bli neder without taking an oath?
So in case something does happen, won't be held.
That's right. If you make a mistake, we talked about Sarah Dibro, the 10 Commandments. You're not supposed to name a God in vain, not supposed to give false testimony, you're not supposed to take an oath and not live up to it. So there's a Jewish tradition to say, I promise, bli neder. I promise without really promising. Leave it to us Jews to come up with that kind of rigmarole. But you don't. The rabbis are very clear that they really did not like people taking oaths, because there's always the danger when you take an oath that you would not fulfill it. Better not to take an oath than to take an oath and not fulfill it. Okay. All right, so I will get these to you, bli neder, in the next few days. All right. If you remember, we left off in talking about rabbinic literature last week. We got to Maimonides' Mishnah Torah, right? And what aspect of Jewish law did Maimonides leave out of his Mishnah Torah? Good answer, nothing. Right? Maimonides tried to deal with all aspects of Jewish law, whether it be the what most of us who are doing the Daf Yomi, the daily Talmud study, are doing. What happens if if I embarrass somebody in public? All right? For example, if I grab somebody's coat and pulls it off of him and embarrass him in public, there's a penalty that I have to pay for embarrassing him. If I take a woman's head covering and pull it off of her head when she's in the marketplace, there's a little story that comes with that. You'll have to look that up yourselves. But all right, so he talks about that. He talks about the rules of sacrifices. How does one go about? The Talmud says where are various sacrifices slaughtered in the temple precincts, and he goes over that issue well. Then he also the laws of the courts, as well as the laws of kings in the Jewish state. Right? So those are all kinds of things that he discusses. And in 14 volumes, in very good, nice, understandable Hebrew, he's very good at it. But, not everybody really has to know all the laws dealing with sacrifices, although it's nice. Furthermore, do you really need to know the well, there's a whole question. His first section is really philosophical, and there are lots of fights over that philosophical beginning. Right? So comes along Rabbi Yechiel ben Asher. I mentioned him last week. I think I started talking about him last week. And he writes a work called the Arba Turim, the 4 pillars, or the 4 columns, in which he only talks about those aspects of Jewish law, halacha, that pertain to the world in which they lived. Okay, so the laws of holidays, the laws of torts, damages, because Jewish communities had their own court systems, but the laws of the Messiah, the Messianic era, the laws of kings, the laws of sacrifices, those he does not deal with. Now, his father Rabbeinu Asher was, as I mentioned last time, comes from Germany, Cologne, I believe it was, so there's a kind of a combination between Ashkenazic and Sephardic heritages in his writings. And so when the Arba Turim is written, he says in his introduction that, well, he's covering the I'm sorry, we'll eliminate that for the moment. All right, so he goes over the laws, but he brings in the various Ashkenazic and Sephardic approaches as well. And the basically a 4-volume work, and your Orach Chaim, the days of everyday life and holidays, your Choshen Mishpat, the laws dealing with torts, your Adea, the laws dealing with mourning and kashrut, Even HaEzer, marriage, and things of that nature. So part of what he's also doing is kind of updating. No matter when a law code is written, there's always going to be some updating that's going to take place. Questions are asked that may not be clearly answered by the earlier codes, and so that's what he's doing. And the later authorities discuss what he has to say, and some of those commentaries become very important. 2 major commentaries become extremely important. One was written by a man by the name of Yosef Karo. We'll come back to in great detail in a second. And the other by Moshe Isserles. Now, the Beit Yosef, house of Joseph, hence the name, is a massive work commenting on the Torah, on this work. And if you are truly interested in the development of Jewish law up to the modern era, you have to look at the Beit Yosef. No great scholar of Jewish law would ignore it if it's within the parameters of what he touches on. And Moshe Isserles is from Krakow, which is in Poland, while Yosef Karo really was, I think he was born in it's got here somewhere, Toledo, Spain. Okay, but I think he went through, I believe he does make his way through Turkey to Sfat. He's part of that group of mystics that settled in Sfat. Okay. And so he's Sephardi. His inclinations are towards the Sephardic interpretation of the law. Moses Isserles from Krakow, Poland, is going to follow the Ashkenazic approach. Now, what is major, at least for Amcha, the general Jewish population, is that Karo decides to make an abridgment of his Beit Yosef. So that, you don't have to be a great scholar to follow what he's got to say. And the name that was chosen for this work is the set table, or the Shulchan Aruch. So when we say the Shulchan Aruch, we're really talking about kind of a Reader's Digest, because he digests down from his comments in the Beit Yosef, follows the same exact division that the Torah was. Okay? It's 4 volumes. The chapters are the same chapters. It's more divided up within the chapters than the Torah is exactly. But if you want to know about the laws of X, you'll find it in chapter 35 of the Torah. You'll find the same discussion in 35 of the Shulchan Aruch. But Again, there's a problem. He's Sephardi. Pui. No, not Sephardi. But he gives a Sephardic psak din. Okay, for example, the Sephardim say, if you perform a mitzvah that you're not required to perform, but you do it anyway. For example, traditionally, a woman waving the lulav and etrog on Sukkot. Traditionally, women were not obligated to do that. It was considered to be a time-bound mitzvah, and women were considered to be free from having to observe time-bound mitzvot. We're not going to get into whole arguments about that right now, all right? So if a woman chose to do that mitzvah, does she say the bracha? Karo says no, following in the footsteps of Maimonides. Right? Moses Iserlus is not happy with that because the Ashkenazic tradition is no. If a woman performs a mitzvah that she's not obligated to perform, she says the bracha is too. So if all you had was Yosef Karo's Shulchan Aruch, you wouldn't know the proper halacha. If you're Sephardi, okay, it's fine. You're a Sephardi, you follow that tradition. But you're an Ashkenazi, that's not correct. So he wrote what was called the Mappa. Mappa means tablecloth. And you can hear a game that's going on here. You have the set table, the Shulchan Aruch, but it needs a tablecloth on top of it, the Mappa. And so eventually, the way the Shulchan Aruch gets published is it's got the words of Karo, and where the Ramah, Rabbi Moses Iserlus, has something to say, it gets plugged into there. Usually by his name Haggah, a addition or comment. And he will then give you the Ashkenazic psak. So when Karo says no for the bracha, Ramah says, but we say yes for the women saying the bracha. Okay? And in other commentaries get written around the Shulchan Aruch, and they became known as the kelim, the utensils, or the plate, the knives, forks, and spoons, and what have you, of the Shulchan Aruch. Right? So the question, the Shulchan Aruch became the dominant law code in the Jewish world. Even till today, we speak of the Shulchan Aruch. I'm going to talk about some other sources. Yes?
Are these like commentaries published in like books?
Oh yeah, these are all books. These are all books. I'm sorry, I make that clear. Yeah, you can, today everything's got, you can find Hebrew and English translations of these works. So Maimonides Mishnah Torah, both in various editions, even with various but good question. You know, by the time of Maimonides, or a little bit later than that, most of the material starts to get written down. There's some argument before that era whether or not the learning was mostly oral. And there's a wonderful book that I don't remember her name right now, but it was a work on moving from orality to the printed text. And it was highly praised and highly condemned, because one of the people that she quotes in it says she doesn't understand what I was teaching, and goes to task on her. And there was a great diatribes back and forth in some magazines. It was fun reading, but it's a very interesting work talking about that movement, because Judaism is never in a vacuum. And we know in the Middle Ages, oral traditions throughout the European world, and the Muslim world, I believe too, were being written down, and codexes and things like that. And so the Jewish community followed suit. Just like when it comes to the commentaries on the Talmud in a few minutes, that may also owe itself to certain Christian patterns of commentary. Okay. So yeah, if you want to, now the thing is, I'm going to talk about another work in a few minutes, but if you say the shul, when somebody, okay, so but you can pick up a copy of the Shulchan Aruch, and actually, in our notes, I think I have a section of it. But anyway, okay. Now, this was not the end of law codes. In the 19th century, a Hungarian rabbi, Rabbi Shlomo Gansried of Ungvar, which at that time was in Hungary. I don't know where it is now. Borders changed back and forth, and it took me forever before I truly understood where my family came from in the Ukraine, and I'm still not completely sure that's the right spot. But anyway, borders move. Anyway, so he wrote a short version of the Shulchan Aruch, again, a kind of a Reader's Digest of the Shulchan Aruch, cutting out a lot of things, but giving the major things of the everyday knowledge the ordinary Jew should know. But he was from Hungary, and Hungarian Jewry was fairly right-wing. So his approach is more on the right wing. But if you hear somebody saying, I read it in the Shulchan Aruch, and they're not really somebody you would think would be able to handle the real Shulchan Aruch, he probably read it in this book. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abbreviated Shulchan Aruch. And that was very popular. There's English editions of it, Hebrew English editions of it, very popular for the layperson, for sure. Now, another important work that I want to mention, and this is a work called the Mishnah Brura, the clarified Mishnah. The Mishnah Brura was written by a man by the name of Israel Meir HaKohen, who was born in 1839 and died in 1933 in Radin, which then was Poland, now Belarusia. All right. Anybody know of the synagogue Beth Radin? All right. Well, that's really from Radin. That was the same place. Okay, so the people who came from there made their congregation. Not unusual. Anyway, he's also called the Chafetz Chaim because he wrote on ethical precepts. And people talk about the Chafetz Chaim. That's his most important work on ethics, not talking evil about other people and not lying and slandering and all of that. And his is a commentary on the first section of the Shulchan Aruch. Became very popular, very influential in those who are concerned with Jewish law, the Mishnah Brura. And the last work that I want to mention, it's actually on your list that you should purchase, although now it's out of print, was a guide to Jewish religious practice, printed in 1979 by Rabbi Isaac Klein. He was born in 1905 and died in 1979. It was published right after his death. And he was very important halachic authority in the conservative movement. And he was born in Europe, this village of, I can't really pronounce it, Varpalanka, today part of Mukachevo, which was then Hungary, for anybody who's interested in the geography. Came to the U.S. in 1921, got a BA from City College. After he was studied at Yeshiva University, then transferred to the Jewish Theological Seminary, where he was ordained in 1934. And he was one of the only 3 students who received what the legal degree of what called Hatarat Hora'ah, which you're never going to remember, so don't worry about it. But that's a special ordination. That's saying you really know not just issues of kashrut and marriage and things like that, but you mastered the Shulchan Aruch in its entirety. Okay, and he later got a PhD. So he was a rabbi in Buffalo. So he's also a near neighbor of ours from here. When he was at the would go to the seminary and teach, he made mimeographs. Anybody know what a mimeograph is? Some of us oldsters here. Mimeograph notes on Jewish law, mostly again following the mostly the first section of the Shulchan Aruch, but also kashrut and some other things, as you can see in his book when you look at the chapters. And when I was a student, that was really something you want to get a hold of. So I got hold of all of the mimeographed pages, went to a bookbinder, and had them bound for me for my research purposes. And it was like an old type. It's before computers, guys. Just a typewritten on a kind of thing with a few mistakes and X's and corrections. And then I graduated in 77, and in 79, it was all published in this work. Okay. Because of his relationship to the conservative movement, it became very popular amongst the conservative rabbis, especially those who are of traditional bent. And it is invaluable if you want to understand on the basic level Jewish law as it applies today, as interpreted by one of the leading voices of the conservative movement. Now, there are many works being written on Jewish law on different sections of it. Today's world, there's so many books being written and published, and with computerization and all of that stuff, it's a plethora of works and minutiae that are being investigated by various individuals. It makes life increasingly difficult to follow all the ins and outs of Jewish laws that's understood today. But these major works are really the guides for Maimonides' Mishnah Torah, the Shulchan Aruch, and these other modern versions, the Kitzer, Mishnah Berurah, Rabbi Klein's work. Of course, Rabbi Klein will not be referenced in the Orthodox world. Right? Now, when we were talking about the Talmud, the Talmud itself was more or less finished in the sense of a work. Anything that came after the time of the Talmud was commentary. The latest rabbis of the Gaonic period, we're talking about around 600 of the Common Era, some of their words got into the Talmud. Right? Here and there a few. But most of the time, anybody who lives after the Talmudic era, if it would write, their words would be commentary. And the Talmud is not a simple text to understand. It's in Aramaic. There are two different Aramaic dialects. The one in the Babylonian Talmud is Eastern Aramaic. The Talmud of Eretz Yisrael is Western Aramaic. They're not always the same. They don't always use the same nomenclature for certain issues. And of course, as I said, the dominant Talmud was the Babylonian Talmud. People studied it. It was kept oral, as was asked a minute, Vivian talked about. And you needed somebody who knew it to teach it to you. Even when it was finally written down, it still was not an open book. And so there was an important figure. He's referred to as Rashi. Rashi is the abbreviation, Jewish tradition, you got books filled with telling you what the abbreviations are. All right. Anybody know what IBM stands for?
International Business Machines.
All right. But how many people know? So Rashi, many people know it's Rashi, but have no idea what it means. It's Rabbi or Rav, Shlomo, Solomon. Yitzchaki means son of Isaac. All right. So Shlomo ben Yitzchak was born in Troyes in northern France in 1040 and dies in Worms in 1105. And he studied in the various academies that are around that time. And his teachers were students of the most important Ashkenazic figure of the 2 generations earlier, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Gershom or Hagolah. When Rashi comes home and he founds a yeshiva and brings in lots of students, and he began writing 2 major works. One, a commentary, especially on the Torah. No one studies the Torah without Rashi's commentary. The other, which is really more important, is his commentary on the Talmud. Rashi's commentary on the Talmud opens up the Talmud to people who otherwise would find it to be a totally closed book. He explains various things that are found in the Talmud that aren't spelled out. He will sometimes translate words for, especially words for things that are not a halter for a horse. So what does he translate a halter for a horse into? What language? French. Oh, medieval French. One of the great sources for medieval French for words that are not, all around the people all the time is Rashi's commentary. Although you have to figure out sometimes, because it's all written in Hebrew letters, and what the French word was. Right? His commentary, though, was like I said, on the Torah, and people would learn Chumash and Rashi, the Torah with Rashi's commentary. That was an accepted fact, that to be at least considered to be literate, an ordinary literate Jew, you had to know Chumash and Rashi. But in order to distinguish between the text of Rashi and the text of the Chumash, they adopted eventually a different Hebrew alphabet form. It's called Katav Rashi, Rashi script. But sometimes it's written today in regular Hebrew script. But many of the commentaries, rabbinic commentaries of later generations, are written in this other script to make it more mystical, I guess, and more difficult for those who aren't in on it. Okay? Now, what Rashi does is essentially explain basic words, basic passages in the Talmud. Pass this around a minute after I explain everything. What page do we have on here? Oh yeah, the Rashi script is here. So it says in the Mishnah, if somebody says, Yivaruchecha tovim, if somebody says, may the good bless you, zo derech haminut, this is a heretical approach. It's heresy. Why? Rashi says, Yerucha tovim, how do you say derech minut? He explains what does it mean? She'enu kolel risha'im b'shivcho shel makom, because he doesn't include the wicked in his praising of God. The Chachamim lamdu, and the sages taught or limdu. Michal vana she'aricha ra u'mena'a hakatuv ben menei haktorah. That from the levana, whose aroma is strong, actually bad, Uman and Manakatu Bain Samane Hakatorah, and yet the rabbis included it amongst the other spices that were used to make the incense. Because we need their aroma liot aguda achat in one grouping. Okay? So Rashi explains why that's a problem. Let's see a quick one. The Mishnah says, "Al ken sipor yagil rachamecha." May your mercy extend to the nest of a bird. And Tom is going to say that we shut them up if they say that in the prayers. So reciting the prayer, they say these words, is shut them up. Don't say that. Why? Rashi explains, Kilashana zeh, in this kind of language, Rachamecha magin al kain sipur, that your mercy extends to the nest of the bird, because when you go in the wild, when you collect the young of a bird, or you collect the eggs of a wild bird that are kosher, you have to shoo the mother bird away. As God has had mercy upon them, he should have mercy on us. It's not a question of mercy. Rashi says later on, the Talmud says later on, this is a divine decree. Okay, so don't start saying that. So that's most of the time, that is what Rashi will do. Mostly he's talking about basic words that are here and there. Once he did that, until the modern era, nobody else has done something quite like that. But now, I'll get a little history, and then we'll come to the next great important commentaries. Rashi had 3 daughters, and there's been some novels written about Rashi's daughters, if you wish to read those. 2 of whom married prominent Torah scholars. And his grandsons included such scholars as Rabbeinu Yaakov Tam, Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Meir, the Rashbam, and Rabbeinu Yitzchak, the Ri. These were his grandsons. His sons-in-law were scholars. His grandsons were all scholars. And they came up, if I want to, all right, like we taught what Grandpa said, I want to add, I want to come up with something. What am I going to contribute? So the next number of generations in the world of Ashkenaz, this is Ashkenazic Jewry, although the Sephardic world accepted Rashi's commentary, and not always agreeing, but his basic commentary. So they wrote additions, Tosafot, addendai, on what Rashi had to say, or on the Talmud. But Rashi already gave you the basic explanation, so unless they disagreed, they didn't say anything about it. What they did do is say, you know what, it says on page 75 of this tractate, X, and it says on page 77 of tractate Y, this. They seem to contradict each other. What are we going to do? Well, they can't contradict each other. We have to find a way to explaining away that contradiction. Or if it is a contradiction, to see what we can do with it. But they are more concerned with a broader brush of the Talmud. So, for example, everybody said Yevucha Tovim, that he should the good should bless you. So Tosfos first begins. He gives a different interpretation from Rashi. And Tosafot, by the way, means the addenders. We don't know for sure on each page of the Talmud who is the author of what we call the Tosafot. Even though Tosafot, especially if people calling Tosafot as if it's one person. It's many men, not women. Women weren't generally involved with this. Sometimes they can be identified. Sometimes they identify some of the people that they're quoting, but otherwise they're anonymous. So in this first case, Tosfos disagrees with Rashi, or gives it. He says, Rashi just says, you got to have the good and the bad together in the ketoret, the incense. So Tosfot, the first Tosfot here says, Yavucha Tovim, the good should bless you. Perush, the explanation being, Shemotzi et haposhiim min haklal, because it excludes evildoers from the general group. Inami, or else, which is kind of like what Rashi said, or else, mishum demechse kishtei rishuyot. It makes it seem like there are two powers. Tomar Elohim Tovim, good, God of good and God of bad. Okay. So now here, later on in the Talmud, on that page, it says everything is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of heaven. Everything is in the hands of heaven except fear of heaven. You know, there's no free anything, no free will. And it seems like, according to that, you know, God controls everything, except whether or not you're going to be pious. Kasha, it's a difficulty. Dahaba Perik Elu Na'arot, because in the chapter Elu Na'arot, now this was written before the standardization of the Talmud. So if you wanted to cite a passage in the Talmud, you cited the name of the chapter. Elu Na'arot. Now you have to know that Elu Na'arot is a chapter in the Masechet Ketubot. If you don't know that, you have no idea what Tosafot is talking about. However, when it's printed today, as I will pass around, some editor at some point in time gave you the reference point. Okay. Now it says there, Hakol bidei shemaim chutz mitzinim upachim. Everything in the hands of heaven except for colds and fevers. All right. Venira, the Hachamayri told Dota Adam, is here it seems that we're talking about the history of a person, not the history, but the nature of the person. Im yechacham or tipesh, whether he's going to be wise or foolish, ani or ashir, wealthy or poor or wealthy, gibor or chalash, a mighty person or a weak person. The kol nigzor love, everything is decreed upon him at birth, chutz min hayira, except for the fear of heaven. As is written in the Torah, Ayitalel ashir be'oshro, a wealthy person should not praise God for his wealth, v'hagibor b'gvurato, nor a mighty person for his might. Ki im bezot yitalel hamitalel. This is what a person should give praise for. Haseichel hayodea oti. The wise knows me, quoting Jeremiah. Right? And then he says that's going to happen. And then Vahatam, and there is referring to events that happen to a life up in a person after he's born. They are in the hands of heaven except for tzinim and pachim, meaning cold and heat. All right, so without going into great depth on the whole discussion there, the point being, you see, he's got a passage here, and he's got a passage there, and they clearly contradict each other. So the resolution that Tosfot is trying to do is they talk about different things. Yeah, everything is in the hands of heaven when we're talking about how you're born into this world, what your basic nature is. If you're born to rich people, or you're born to poor people, if you're born redhead, dark-haired, blonde, blue-eyed, whatever it may be. Yeah, that's all foreordained for you. It's in your genes, maybe. But what's going to happen to you if you're going to get caught up in a war or this and that, the stock market is going to crash, go up, that is in the hands of heaven for a different ring. Those are the events of your life. But the weather, God doesn't manage that much. I don't know. Right? I'm not 100% sure what he means by colds and heats. So that's what the Tosafot do. And other commentaries are written in the Talmud. But Rashi and Tosafot were considered to be the most important of the commentaries. Yes.
So is that the Talmud that you're reading from, or?
This is a copy. Now, what this is a copy of a page from the Talmud that I'm going to pass around. All right. And a lot of other things that are in here. And unfortunately, this is a very large, it's got more details, but I'm not going to go into all of that. If you're interested, yes.
Read it into now the weekly rituals.
Well, it depends. Okay. Remember I said that there's this difference of opinion about women saying the blessing. So you will find, it's not spelled out in the Talmud, and you will find commentaries on the Talmudic passages that relate to that. Okay. The very beginning of the Talmud talks about recitation of the Shema at night. Now, I give you a copy in English, or just I gave out the Hebrew? Let me see. I think you just have that. All right. So, by the way, if you haven't looked at it yet, there's an app called Safaria. All the Talmud's on there, and the entire Talmud is translated in Safaria. So let me see. I want to look. All right, let's go to the Talmud. Let's go to the Babylonian Talmud Brachot. Okay, so when do we say the Shema at nighttime? So, where is it? I already donated to you. Don't ask me more today. So Rashi says, at the very beginning of the Talmud says, a mission, when do we recite the Shema at nighttime? From the time the Kohanim enter to eat their truma. So Rashi explains, these are Kohanim who have become ritually impure, and they have to go to the mikveh, and they have to wait for sunset, and now has come their time when they can eat truma. All right. And actually translate this for you, the top Rashi there. We'll come back to that. I lost it already. 23 kind of Tosafot. All right. So Rashi, in discussing that a few lines later, says, how is it that we recite the Shema when it's still daytime, and we don't wait until the stars come out at night? All right? When can you say Shema at nighttime? The first answer to that is when time the stars come out at night. So why do we say daven early, which tells us the same problems that existed today existed there? So Rashi gives an answer, the Kriyat Shema, that we say it when we go to bed at night, that serves as the essence of the saying the Shema at nighttime. And the Tosafot take him to task on that. In this case, there's no difference on halacha in the end, because you're supposed to do both, but they come at it from different positions. So when codes came about, or when a person had a question about the practical law, and there was not a clear-cut statement in the Talmud, often they rely upon the commentaries, and then what the commentaries say becomes eventually introduced into the legal codes. Sometimes they will give you both answers. And they'll say, he says this, he says that. My opinion is this, or he may just leave them both opinions there. All right? Maimonides did not do that. So, oh yeah, here I have it right here. I knew I had it somewhere. Okay, so we'll go quickly through. We're going to learn some Talmud. Okay. So, as I said, the Mishnah says, when do we say this Shema at nighttime? The time the stars come out at night until no, it didn't say that. I'm jumping the gun. When do we recite Shema at nighttime? From the time the priests enter to eat their truma until the end of the first watch. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. So the Gemara, the Talmud, discussing this says, Tana heichi koi the ktanim eimatai. Wait a minute. What is the Tana doing here when he says, when do we start reciting the Shema? How do you know you say it? Too, and furthermore, Maishna the Tani Barvit Beresha. And so, why does he start talking about the evening Shema to begin with? Litnei the Shacharit Beresha. You should talk about the morning Shema at first, because we usually think the day starts in the morning. That's how we lead our lives. So the Gemara answers, Tana Akroikoi. The Tana is relying on a verse of the Torah. Dichtiv, because it's written in the Torah, B'shochbecha uvkumecha, when you lie down and when you rise up. So when do you lie down? Nighttime. So he starts talking about the nighttime Shema. V'hachi ktane. And this is what he's teaching. Zman kriyat Shema d'shchiva. The time of reciting the Shema of lying down, Emat. When is it? From the time the priests enter, they eat their truma. Oh, I can tell you another answer. This is great, right? Right off the bat, we're not given one answer. Okay? He learns it from the story of the creation of the world. Because there in the Torah it's written, there was an evening, there was a morning one day. Okay? So the Torah starts off with evening, so the Mishnah starts off with evening. If that's the case, later on, we're going to get to the morning, after we talk about the morning, Shema, that we say two blessings before the Shema and two after. I'm sorry, one after. In the evening, we say two blessings before and two blessings afterwards. Litne, the Arvi Beresh, should talk about the evening first. When do we say Shema nighttime? Da. When you say Shema morning time? Da. In the evening, we say two blessings before and two blessings after. In the morning, we say two blessings before and one after. But it doesn't do that. So when you say Shema at night, when do we say Shema in the morning? When do we say the morning blessings? What morning blessings do we say the Shema in the morning? What blessings do we say the Shema at nighttime? So he wants to know the structure. Why is it structured this way? Literary criticism. Now, the author of the Mishnah, the Tana, begins with the evening, and then he turns around to the morning. And since he's talking about the morning, he discusses the morning issues, and then he talks about the evening. Okay. So now, Maimonides, it's the same one. There's just one. So Maimonides in his Mishnah Torah, you want to know what's the law? So Maimonides writes, Ezuzman the Kriyat Shema. What is the time for evening Shema? B'layla. Mitzvata mishashi yitziat kochavim. It's mitzvah. The best way of doing it, the ideal way of performance, is when the stars come out. Ad chatzi halayla, until the middle of the night. We didn't talk about. V'im avar, and if he transgressed, the ichar v'kara achlo ala amud hashachar, if he read the Shema before the break of dawn, yatsa yedei chovato, he's fulfilled his obligation. Ideally, you should do it from the time the stars come out at night. Finish before, and you have until midnight, celestial midnight. So what happens if you miss it? As long as it's not the next day already, then you at least fulfilled the basic law. So why does it say until the middle of the night? He's quoting Rabbi Gamliel in the Mishnah, who says it's in order to keep you far away from sin. Yes.
Does Rashi have different letters?
Yeah. I remember I said Rashi is written in different Hebrew letters. So the way the Talmud is set up there, I didn't really explain it. The normal pagination of the Talmud today, which has been around for a few hundred years, was established in, I think it was Warsaw. I forget at the moment. The Talmud is, the Mishnah is then followed by the Talmud and are identified together. The side next to the binding, the long side next to the binding, is normally Rashi's commentary. The one on the outside is the Tosafot. And around them, as that points out in that display, are various other kinds of commentaries and information. And at some stage, they gave different prints to the Rashi, so and Tosafot using that quote, we call Rashi script, but others refer to as Rabbinic script. So you can identify the difference. All right, so now you heard from Maimonides the law, right? He didn't say anything about the distinctions, the various opinions. He just gave you the halacha. He didn't say this is sages say until midnight. Rabbi Gamliel says till the break of dawn, although that is clearly involved in his decision making. What does the Shulchan Aruch say? Zman kriyat Shema b'layla. The time is saying Shema at nighttime. Misha yitziat shlosha kochavim. The time that 3 stars appear. So now we're defining a little better because the Rambam says Yitzias Kochavim. The Talmud later on discusses that and says in more detail. So he says, explains, it means when 3 stars come out, Ketanim, little ones, right? Not the big ones, which would also include planets. Right? When 3 smaller stars come out, V'imhu Yom Unan. And if it's a cloudy day, Yamtinach yet say Safek Milibo. He waits until he's sure that the time has passed. V'im karak kodem lachem. If he recited the Shema before this time, chozer v'korei ota below brachot. He goes back and recites the Shema without the blessings. All right, so that's the first thing. If you say the Shema before the beginning time that you're supposed to begin, you have to repeat it after that time, but you don't repeat the blessings that are part of the normal service. Okay? Then he said, this is still the Shulchan Aruch, V'im hatzibur makdimim likrot kriyat Shema. If the congregation acts early and recites the Shema, mi ba'od yom, when it's still daytime, meaning any time before the stars come out, up to, well, he's not defining the earliest point, but all right. Yikra imahem kriyat Shema, you should read the Shema with them, uberchoteha, and its blessings, but yitpalel imahem, and recite the evening service with them. Ukishgias zman, and when proper time arrives, korei kriyat Shema below bracha. He says the Shema without blessings. Okay, so and this already is mentioned in the Tosafot, that when are we supposed to say? How many times a day are we supposed to pray? 3 times a day. The service, the daily service, the morning, afternoon, and the evening. Most synagogues, when do they say the afternoon and evening service? Together, either just prior to sunset or after sunset, or even before sunset. Why? It's a little more difficult to get a minyan and all the times you need. So it's easier to put it all together. And already in the Middle Ages, they faced that problem. And he's alluding to that in this passage. So now the Rabbi Moses Easterless adds here Nonetheless, he should not go back and pray at nighttime. And he doesn't recite the evening service again. Shatzibur makdim yuharbe lifnei halayla, that for the congregation is done much earlier than nighttime. Ela imkain hu ragil b'shar prishot v'chasidut. Unless he is normal to be somebody who is very pious and separates himself from getting caught up in these not as good things. Then he doesn't look like somebody who's haughty if he goes back and prays a second time. Right? So Karo gives us the law again. Ideally, from stars come out. If the congregation says it earlier, and according to other passages, it means up to an hour and a quarter before sunset. You pray with the community. And then you recite the Shema again later. You'll see in a lot of Orthodox synagogues, they'll make notes, especially in the summertime when we have an earlier minyan. They'll say, don't forget to recite the Shema after the stars come out. So now, the Mishnah Brura, we're now up to the 1920s, writes, Balayla Mishat, nighttime time, he's commenting on the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch said, when is this time? The time is saying the Shema is at nighttime from the time 3 stars come out at night. So he says, Dichtiv, because it's written, V'shochva of Kumecha, Laila. When you lie down and when you rise up, V'kodem Laila, that's, and before nighttime, Lavzman Shkiva, it's not the time of lying down. V'alayla mikre mishniro barakia gimel kochavim beinonim. And nighttime is called when 3 middle-sized stars appear. Not little ones, that's later. Not the big ones, that's too early. And medium. All right. But now, since not everyone is expert, not all of us have our astronomy license. All right. And they might make a mistake when it comes to the big ones. Because the big stars are not a sign of nighttime. Because sometimes they appear even in the daytime. Obviously, we're talking about planets. They were stringent. Gabe kriyat shema, the reciting of the shema. The eno koreh ashir gimel katanim. They don't recite until 3 small ones. He says, if you got 3 middling size, it's okay. But people were more stringent to wait till 3 small ones. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which is actually written earlier than the Mishnah Brura, Zman Kriyat Shema al Tefilat Arvit Hu, the time of saying Shema at nighttime, Mikashanir and Shlosha Kochavim Ktanim, when 3 small stars appear. And he's saying it in wait, etc. And now he explains. Afal Pisha Dayan Eino Laila, Bimnei Torah Chatzibur. He talks about the congregation davens early. Shehu Torech le'esof hatzibur shenid, because it's difficult to get the community together again the second time to have a separate service. Ubilvad shlo yehe kodem plag hamincha, provided that this early time of reciting the Shema at night is not earlier than an hour and a quarter before sunset. That's called plag hamincha. Again, it's celestial times. Because if you say the evening Shema before that time, or you recite the evening prayers before that time, no matter what, you have not fulfilled the mitzvah. Happy is the person who can pray evening service with a congregation at nighttime. Between mincha and mariv, so you sit around in the synagogue and you learn some Talmud or you learn something else until the time. To join the night and evening with Torah, because that's a great thing. V'al kol panim, and nonetheless, ra'ui l'kol yireh shamayim, it's really incumbent on anybody's true God-fearing person. She'im hitpalel b'tzibur kodem halayla, if he prayed before nighttime. Lo yochal kodem halayla, he should not eat until it's really nighttime, the three small stars. All right. So you see the language is a little bit different in what they're contrasting and dealing with. So those are some of the law codes. Now, I gave you some other material. One of them, it's a sheet with it's not very good print. I think you got it. It's taken from a syllabus from the conservative rabbinic body, the Rabbinical Assembly, on different issues that they've written on. So we say on the first side of the page, it says Howard Handler, an image of God, a dissent in favor of the full equality of gay and lesbian Jews in the community of conservative Judaism. So the discussion about the role. Castle Abelson, placing homosexual rabbis in congregations. Aaron Goodman, placing homosexual rabbis in congregations, wrote a different tshuva. So these are all, this page has got a number of things dealing with those issues of sexuality and different responses that were written. On the back page, a second wedding ceremony, a second opinion, Rabbi Joel Roth, when there was no ketubah. What do you do about a couple when there's no ketubah? Morris Shapiro, the text of the ketubah. So these are all issues that were handled by the law committee of the Rabbinical Assembly. Now, you have a question in Jewish law. So what should you do? You don't know the answer. What do? You ask your rabbi. You don't ask Rabbi Google. Okay, Rabbi Google, you never know. That idea, it says you should have a rabbi. You should have somebody that you turn to for decisions of Jewish law. Right? Not everybody does that. I understand that. People do what they want to do. But ideally, if you're not a scholar enough to answer the question, you turn to somebody who is. And rabbis themselves will sometimes, especially you hear some of these, the homosexual issues, which was a very divisive issue within the conservative movement. Different approaches came about. So the law committee, this what's its current title? Committee on Jewish Laws and Standards. The standard is more important than a law, by the way. A rabbi, usually, would turn to them with a question. And if they took it up, they might assign one or two people, or if it was clear there were differences initially on how to approach the question, they might assign several different rabbis on the committee to write a paper. And Rabbi A would say this, Rabbi B might concur or disagree, what have you. And then they would bring these papers to the law committee. And they would discuss the papers. And they might have suggestions. They said, go back and rework it. And when they finish the reworking, they go back to the committee. And they decide, all right, we're going to have a vote. If one of the teshuvot receives at least 6 votes, it becomes an official position of the law committee. You can have 2 official positions, one saying yes and one saying no. Okay, a quick rundown. When the whole issue of ordaining and in issues of marriage, dealing with homosexuality, there were 4 papers that were written and voted on. One was rejected, did not get enough votes. That was the most stringent one of them. One paper basically said we have to have sympathy for people who have no control over their sexual urges, but nonetheless, we will not permit the ordination or of people who are not heterosexual, or at least not who are practicing homosexuals. We will not do. Third paper said the discussion in the Mishnah and Talmud and the Torah is comparing homosexual behavior, male, to dealing, if a man lies with a man as with a woman. What does that mean? It means anal intercourse. That's the thing that the Torah forbids, nothing else. So if someone who is homosexual is willing to forego that sexual activity, then we can ordain such a person as a rabbi. Because they're not, we have all kinds of urges. The question is whether or not we give in to the urges. If it's not permit, I may have an urge to eat a ham sandwich. Just because I have an urge to it doesn't mean I violate anything. The issue of lesbians is much more complicated because nowhere in the Torah does it really address the issue. And even rabbinic literature seems to be unclear. And well, before there were women rabbis, there was no question. So you can't ordain a lesbian rabbi because you can't ordain a woman. But once you have ordaining women, the question of a lesbian, then it sort of is not the big issue. And there's more leeway for that approach. The fourth paper basically said the understanding of love and commitment that we find in rabbinic literature and the Torah is not what we hold today to be the limitations on life. I don't remember the exact wording of it. And essentially they said, yes, it's fine. So 3 of the papers received sufficient votes to be considered official policy within the conservative movement. And some people voted for more than one paper. Okay? It's hard to think somebody voted for the most lenient paper and the one who on the second most stringent paper could have voted on both of them, but there are all kinds of strange things that happen in these committee meetings. All right. Now, I will give you an example of one that I was challenged with myself in my congregation years ago. Reciting Mariv early on Erev Shabbat. Okay. Question. Is it permissible to recite the Mariv before Plag Mincha, 1 halachic hours before sunset on Friday night? In communities where in the summer months sunset is after 9 p.m., even the customary early time to recite Mariv, and that is Plag Mincha, will be after 7:30 p.m. This can be a burden for people who want to follow the traditional practice of reciting their prayers before eating the Sabbath meal, but who have children or others who have a hard time waiting until after 8:30 p.m. to eat dinner. On those occasions, is it possible to recite Mariv earlier than Plag HaMincha? Okay, that's the question. I intentionally pointed out the halachic the codes, earlier codes, did not seem to give any room for that. Okay? They all said you can't do it earlier than Plag HaMincha. Response. Most traditional sources are clear that in general, the earliest time one can recite the evening prayer is Plag HaMincha. Rabbi Gerald Skolnick gives an excellent summary of the halacha in his Teshuvah on the latest times for Mincha, earliest times for Mariv, which was approved by this committee in 1994. There's a leniency in the Skolnick Teshuvah in that the sources say one should either go with Rabbi Yehuda and recite Mincha before Plag HaMincha and Mariv after, or with the Rabbanan, other rabbis, and recite Mincha before sunset and Mariv after. But in these times, we allow the recitation of both Mincha and Mariv between Plag HaMincha and Shkia. That's the normal practice in many synagogues, many Orthodox synagogues, even though it's really not in accordance with strict letter of the law would say, it's almost universally accepted that you can act in two different ways. In the wintertime, you say mincha just before Mariv, and it's right at sunset. And in the summertime, you will say mincha after plag, and Mariv before sunset, which is apples and not, well, but everybody does it. Almost everybody does it. And then he goes and talks about the in northern latitudes, especially at the western end of a time zone, Shabbat may not start until quite late, after 9 p.m. In extreme cases, such as Anchorage, Alaska, in the summer, sunset is 11:41 p.m. and Plag HaMincha is 9:40 p.m. But this is an issue even in less extreme locations. The author of this teshuva chose to write it because he took a position with a congregation in Toledo, Ohio, which held Friday night services during the summer at 6 p.m., a time much earlier than Plag HaMincha, which in the summer can be as late as 7:40 p.m. Right? This teshuva came about in an effort to determine whether such a practice can be permitted. And he goes on to discuss this. He talks about the fact that this is not a new issue. And he cites various passages in the Talmud that deal with some of this. I want to get to the conclusion. All right, psak din. This means this is what I've decided it is. It is clear from reviewing the tshuva of Trumat Hadeshin that at one time the preference was given to prayer with the public over reciting the prayers at the proper time. It is also clear from looking at the later sources that at some point reciting the prayers at the proper time came to be seen as more important. We hereby affirm the wisdom of the earlier approach that in these days, when the majority of people, even our observant elite, are not going to wait until after 9 p.m. to eat, that we should prefer to encourage public prayer, even if it means compromising on the proper time for prayer. Therefore, during the summer days, it is permissible to recite Mariv early on Erev Shabbat, even before Plag HaMincha. It is clearly preferable to daven at the proper time. If possible, one compromise would be to start services early, have a Dvar Torah after Kabbalat Shabbat, and start reciting Mariv right after Plag HaMincha. In other locations where even this practice would result in services not finishing until well after the customary dinner time, we may rely on Trumat Hadeshin. And I'm not so sure that his interpretation of Trumat Hadeshin fits his explanations, but that's where, the game goes. So this is a modern attempt dealing with a modern contemporary problem in which the law committee had a vote. Okay, so that was his teshuva. It says it was approved by the Committee on Jewish Laws and Standards on October 24th, 2012, by a vote of 8 in favor, 9 opposed, and 3 abstentions. So actually, the majority was opposed. Members voting in favor: Rabbis Pamela Barmash, Elliot Dorff, Baruch Friedman Cole. Anybody ever hear of Baruch Friedman Cole? He was Rabbi Emeritus of Beth Tzedek, classmate of mine. Ruvain Hammer, Josh Heller, David Hoffman, Ellie Spitz, Barry Starr, another classmate. Members opposed: Rabbis Aaron Alexander, Jane Kanarak, Adam Klinkfield, Gail Leibovitz, Jonathan Lubliner, Daniel Nevins, Paul Plotkin, Avram Reisner, and Jay Stein. Members abstaining: Rabbi Susan Grossman, Jeremy Kamnowski, and Loa Weiss. So it's interesting to note that, yes, the more liberal quotation rabbis voted in favor. The opposition included those who I would consider to be on the liberal side of the spectrum. Okay. As well as those who are more on the traditional side of the spectrum. So this became an accepted practice. So therefore, if a rabbi wants to support for praying the evening service early, he can refer to this. This was brought up to me in my community, and I hadn't actually looked at the Shuva, but I said I disagreed with it anyway, and I was happy to learn that I was in the majority, not the minority. Okay, so I would not start the evening service until after an hour and a quarter celestial time before sunset. So that's how things are done. Now, somebody writing a law code 200 years from now may or may not refer to this. Who knows? They may just simply say, as Rabbi X said and supported, it's permissible. Or it might say, as we see, the majority of people involved with this were against it, or what have you. So that's the way things operate. You have the Torah. You have commentaries on the Torah, both rabbinic commentaries. By rabbinic, I mean the old rabbis of the pre-Talmudic era and the Talmudic era. You have medieval commentaries, whether or not they're dealing with law or just interpretation of passages. You have midrashic collections that are talking about narrative, filling in the blanks, filling in the gaps, explaining who Canaan married, where she came from. Or halachic ones, one that discuss recitation of the Shema. You have the Mishnah that attempts to codify, at least to some level, the law. You have the Talmuds that examine what's in the Mishnah, discussing that and other issues. Commentaries on the Talmuds and on these other works. Law codes and response to Shuvot. To Shuvot, normally, if there is a law code that deals with it, must deal with that law code, or it's not going to be considered to be a reasonable teshuvah. If it says X in the Shulchan Aruch and you say Y, you better explain why you reject what it says in the Shulchan Aruch. You may say because the Shach, a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, disagrees. And then you come down to, your rabbi in your synagogue who will be asked, Rabbi, what do we do at this time? And sometime, I'll give you a quick funny thing. I mostly daven in an Orthodox synagogue because that's where I live and that's where it took me. So there was a Brit Milah in the building that morning. And that synagogue has got 4 or 5 minyans that take place at different times. So I was at the 8:30 minyan. I go to the Daf Yomi first, so I'm not that bad. And one of the people say, there was a bris in the building. We don't say tachanim when there's a bris. And I said, that's not the policy of the synagogue. This synagogue's policy is only if it's in that minyan, because there's a big congregation, brisim all the time, different places. Right? So I said, no, you have to, you say tachanim. And another guy comes up earlier than that. A guy came up and says, we know we were with the, how was it exactly? I forget why exactly, but he and I could have opted out, he said. I said, I'm not an Orthodox rabbi. I don't paskin for the synagogue. Right? And I didn't paskin the other one. I just said, that's what the rabbi said that you do in the synagogue. I never give my halachic opinion on anything at that synagogue. That way, I have no problems. Although I have no problem. They're very nice to me. I've even read the Haftorah from the main synagogue at Aliyah. But in the Jewish world, you have pressures that go in different directions. Within the Orthodox world, there's always been a pressure to be more restrictive. Okay? How do you prove that you're holier than thou? By being more restrictive. Even though the Talmud says the person who permits has greater prima facie weight than the person who forbids. It's easy to forbid. Just say you don't do it. To permit it, you have to have a reason. But there is this tendency to go more extreme, and Judaism certainly has that within it. And that's what you have in today's world, where you have the Haredi world, the black hats, whatever you want to call that element. And because of various pressures, even rabbis who are not part of that community want to maintain their relationship. And so therefore, they are sometimes dragged into that more right-wing leanings. On the other side of the spectrum, you have the reality of modern behavior, modern morals, modern attitudes that pull in the other direction. And therefore, the more liberal spectrum of Judaism gets pulled in that direction. And as you go, in the middle is always caught between the two ends. Was the middle cannot hold. But that's the reality. But I will say this, I've come across people who I might disagree with on certain issues that I think they're too liberal. And I've found sometimes that they were more stringent than I was in other issues. Okay? And I respect them for that. They take it seriously. As long as you're taking it seriously and you believe it's meaningful, then I can't fault you for having a position that I disagree with. If you just go with the flow, I'll end with one example that in my point. When I was a rabbi in El Paso, Texas, El Paso del Norte, the Northern Pass. Okay. I had an unveiling, and I had more than 10 adult Jews there, but I did not have 10 adult male Jews present. Right? So I omitted the Kaddish. Said other things, did other stuff, but omitted the Kaddish. The next day or two, a woman came to see me, and her father was a rabbi in Europe, she said, or her grandfather. Everybody's grandfather was a rabbi in Europe. Amazing how many rabbis there are in Europe. And she said, Rabbi, why didn't you count women in the minyan? And I explained to her, I don't. That's my understanding what Jewish law is. And went back and forth. I said, let me ask you a question. Let us say that I did count women in a minyan. I was prepared to count women in a minyan, but there were only 9 adult Jews present. Would you want me to allow you to say the Kaddish? And the answer was yes. So I said, so you're not arguing about Jewish law. You're just wanting to do what you want to do when you want to do it. If you say you have to have a minyan and you count a minyan different ways, okay, that's your position. I agree or disagree, but that's a position. But if you say minyan doesn't matter, you're arguing from another parameter altogether. You can't, you're mixing apples and oranges, and you're coming out with not even decent grapefruit juice. Okay. We got through all of this tonight, so we will continue on our course as scheduled. And God willing, I will remember to send you out those missing pages. Bli neder. And I will see everybody next week. Good night, everyone.
No.
So there was no one in the parking lot, eh?